Running nose this morning. Worst time to have that.
Good morning, everybody. As you come in, we have opened the webinar and we're just letting everyone come in. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. The disembodied voice behind the camera, I promise, will stop talking shortly and we'll turn it over to Sidney Frazier. Just getting a few more people in. So just to let everybody know, the webinar is being recorded. So if you are unable to stay for the whole time, or if you know somebody who signed up hoping to be able to join us, and they aren't able to because of the date change, no problem. We will certainly post this on Middleton Place Foundation's YouTube channel sometime within the week. And it will be available for anybody who is interested. So don't worry if you can't stay the whole time. So just a few logistical things in Zoom. Remember, please, that you do have a chat function at the bottom menu of your screen on a PC or a laptop. There is a menu that has chat and Q&A. You are certainly encouraged to use that Q&A window to ask Sidney questions. He'll be happy to answer them. Some of you sent in questions ahead of time. We have those from your emails that we'll be asking as well. And you can certainly say hello in the chat. So we prefer that you use that Q&A for your questions. I might miss them if you put your questions in the chat window. So please do your best to put them in the Q&A window so that I can follow along and check them off as we go. So, all right, without further ado then, I am going to turn it over to Sidney Frazier, the King of Camellias, VP of Horticulture here at Middleton Place Foundation. Sid, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Karen, and good morning to all of you. This is a great day. It is one of the favorite time of the year for me as we begin to celebrate the Camellias at Middleton Place. Now, I've got to be honest with you, this is truly one of my favorite plants. It really is. And one of the things that I really love about this plant is that it flowers the time of the year when there's pretty much nothing else happening. So I want to encourage all of you to think about coming out to Middleton Place and visiting our garden market and nursery and seeing Kim. Kim is off screen right now, but you will see her off and on. And she will be waiting to sell you whatever kind of camellia that you need. But today, I want to try to convince you that camellias are easy to grow. They're not hard to grow. I know a lot of people are thinking about, well, this plant is hard to grow. I can't grow anything. But I want to tell you, Camellia japonicas are very forgiving plant. So if you can't grow anything, I guarantee you, you'll be able to grow Camellia japonica. Okay? So this workshop is not only done outside with you being in person with me that we can interact, but now we're doing it a little bit differently, right? So I'm going to try to go through all of this like I normally do, just a little bit different. I really love being involved with people and having that communication back and forth. But today we're going to do it this way, and hopefully next season we're going to all be together celebrating the Camellias at Middleton Place. So secondly, want to thank you all for being supporters of the Middleton Place Foundation. We greatly appreciate your past and present support. So when we think about camellias, we really think about Camellia japonica in this region. But there are two types of camellias that you would use in your landscaping, the Camellia sasanqua and the Camellia japonica. Now keep in mind, what you see for the most part around here today would be japonicas. Japonicas want filter light. They want shade. They do not want to grow in the full sun, despite what you read on some of the labels that say, this particular japonica can handle more sun. Do not do that. You don't want to do that. And especially late afternoon sun, that is really not good for the Camellia japonica. The Camellia sasanqua is your sun-loving plant. That is the one that you want to put in the full sun, but it also can grow in partial shade as well. So think about this. First, we're going to set it all up so that you can begin to get ready to start your camellia season in your own garden. Okay? So first thing is site preparation. So you need to pick out a site where you want your camellia to grow.
Keep in mind
Today, for the most part, we're going to be talking about the Camellia Japonica. So if you want to begin to create a Camellia Japonica selection, you must have shade. They need protection from the sun. So filter light is the best kind of light to have for the Camellia Japonica. Now, the second thing is that most people do not want to do this, and this really should have been first, but I kind of put it second just to kind of not beat up on you too much. Have your soil test. Nobody want to have their soil test, so that's the first thing to do. You need to have your soil test because the pH for the Camellia Japonica need to be under 7, not at 7 and not above 7. They love an acid soil, so you want to have that pH number lower. Even though if you were, say, somewhere around 5.5 or 6.5, but make sure you keep it under 7, because once you get above 7, they're not going to be happy, even though if they're planted in the right location. So you do not want to do that. And also keep in mind, they love our region. They love our soil. They love the way how our temperature and winters work, but they are not native plants. And I know you see them all over the place. And some of you, for newcomers, you may think they are native plants. They are not native plants. So I want to kind of show you the area that they are from. And Kim's going to come up and give us a little close-up on this. But keep in mind, this is homeland for them. Out around China, Japan, and some of the islands out there, this plant will be grown out in the wild. It will be out in the forest. So it would be a natural plant in that setting. So most of them would be single flowers. Most of them would be red and different shades of red. But in the Chinese garden and Japanese garden, they use just as much single flowers as formal doubles and semi-doubles. So just wanted to point that out to you, okay? Very good, thank you, Kim. All right, so as we move on, so we got that soil test done. We know what that pH is. So if we have to lower that pH, then we need to do that before we think about buying plants. But I know it's hard to do, so you want to go ahead and purchase that plant. I just know it. I've been there. I know how that is. There's nothing wrong with that. Just keep in mind that you may have to do some adjustment in your soil. And it takes time. That doesn't happen overnight. It can be months and even years as you continue to make that soil pH adjustment. So now you have already picked out your site. You know where you're going to put that plant. Now it's time to go out and buy a plant. Well, naturally, I'm going to tell you, come to Middleton Place, to our garden market at Middleton Place, and purchase your plant, because Kim is going to be waiting on you. And I want to tell you, we have a wide selection of Camellia Japonica. So we don't know how long that selection is going to last. So right after this is over, you might want to contact Kim at Middleton Place to see what she has left. And then she can also order what you need as well. So you want to pick out a healthy plant. When you go out to the garden market or any site, think about picking out a healthy plant overall. And Kim's going to come and give us a little closer look here. Overall, you want to make sure that the plant has nice green foliage. Nice green foliage. That is what you want to have. Because if the plant looks unhealthy, it is unhealthy. Okay? Now, for those of you who are veteran, you probably can nurse that plant back to health. But for those of you who are newcomers, I want to advise you to make sure that you pick out a nice, healthy plant. And in most nurseries, they're not going to want you to take the plant out of the pot to look at the root system. So you can't do that unless you know you're going to purchase that plant first. So nice, healthy green leaves. And you can see the leaves are nice and healthy. This is actually one of the Middleton Place seedling that we grew here at Middleton Place. And this is a nice, overall healthy plant. And this is what you want, nice glossy leaves. The leaves are nice and healthy. They look like this plant is ready to go into the ground. That is what you want to get. Please make sure you check the plant out before you purchase the plant. Okay, so now we have already done that. We already got the plant. We're going to put it in the ground. It's planting time, okay? It's time to put that plant in the ground. A good rule of thumb, doesn't matter what size the container is, and if the container is a 2-gallon container like this, think about what that would look like if that was a 4 to 5-gallon container. That means that you want your hole to be 2 to 3 times larger than the container, okay? But not deeper. You want that root ball to sit
on the bottom of your hole the same way it would have been in the container. Okay, that's very important. So most people tend to dig the hole too deep. And if you put this plant in the ground and the soil come up above the existing root system, the plant is going to struggle. You're going to be cutting off the air circulation to the feeder roots, and those roots are near the surface. So you do not want to do that. Planting properly is one of the #1 reason why your plant will either die or live. So that's very, very, very important. Very important. Make sure you take the time to properly prepare the site for your plant. Now, this is also crucial. If you have soil conditions where you know your soil is not the best soil in the world, then make sure you go ahead and amend that soil before you put the plant in the ground. That is crucial. Most of the time when I get a call from someone that tells me that they plant are struggling, or especially a Camellia Japonica, most of the time the plant have been planted too deep. So you do not want to do that. That's very important. Just take your time and make sure you put the plant in the ground properly. That is crucial to do that. Now, also, I want to talk about transplanting, because some of you, I think I saw some emails where some people say that they had some camellias that were already in the ground and they wanted to transplant the camellia. Well, here's the thing. You still have time to transplant the camellias right now if you want to do that. And I know that might seem a little bit hard because they're blooming right now. But now is the time that you still can do that, because what's happening is that the plant is not concentrating on growing right now. All of the energy is going to the flower. So you don't have any new growth coming out. And we know the new growth will not come out until the flowering season is over. So now's a good time. Here at Middleton Place, we start in November. In November, we start transplanting. So rule of thumb, if the plant has been in the ground for a very long time, say for instance, 30, 40 years, you want to root prune that plant first. You don't want to just dig that whole plant up and move it. So one of the techniques on root pruning is that you can root prune 1/3 of the root system and backfill it with mulch. Just backfill it with mulch, and then continue that process until you get all the way around the plant. And then you can lift the plant out and then transplant it. Now that's for a plant that is very old. That's not for a new plant. A plant that have been in the ground for, say, less than 10 years, you can move the entire plant in one transplant system, okay? Very important. But just keep that in mind, because depending on how the roots are damaged, that will depend whether or not that plant have a chance of survival. So that is crucial. But transplanting can be done. And if the plant is really tall, you want to cut it back before you do that. Because remember, if you're removing 1/3 of the root system, but the plant still have 100% of the growth that was there while the plant had 100% of the root system, there's not enough moisture to support all of that foliage growth. Very important, so you want to cut it back, okay? That is crucial to the plant surviving. Now, I also wanted to talk about this, so I need to go back to this. And I should have mentioned this when we were talking about buying plants. So if you are creating a Camellia Japonica selection, you want to pick out different forms of flower. You do not want them all to have the same shape, the same form. The garden can be much, much more interesting if you have different forms, different color, and different shape of the Camellia Japonica when they are blooming. This is crucial. So make sure you do not pick out all early bloomers, all late bloomers, all mid-season bloomers. You want to mix that up, and that will create a really interesting garden. Different colors, white, red, and pink, and variegated. And make sure that you do not plant them too closely. They need to have at least 7 to 8 feet apart and beyond, depending if you're trying to create a hedge or you're trying to create a standalone plant. That's very important. And also make sure that you think about how big this plant is going to be in 5 years, and 10 years, and 15, 20, 30, 40 years, because sometimes we plant them too close to the doorway. And after 20 years, you are hacking on the plant in order to get in the house. We don't want to do that. So let's think about that. Look at the label on the plant. It will tell you how large that plant will eventually get. Camellia Japonicas can live, to be over 200 years old. So think about that when you're putting that plant in the ground. Okay, all right, so we have covered a lot right there. So also want to talk about fertilization. Now, keep in mind, here in the low country, we don't have to do a lot of fertilization. We do not have to do that. For us here at Middleton Place, we only fertilize once a year. Only once a year. I know some places will say that, well, you need to do it 2 to 3 times a year. That is really unnecessary. You're taking the plant out of its characteristic. That plant know how to survive. You're simply just aiding it along the way, given the fact that you may have some soil that is not very well suited for the plant to grow. So what we do is after the plant gets through blooming, we go in and we prune the plant and then we fertilize. And that's the basic way of doing it. If you go to some of your companies that sell fertilizer, just tell them that you're growing Camellia Japonica, and they know that that's an acid-loving plant. So that's the type of fertilizer they will give you. But please have the soil test done. That is crucial. Have that soil test done. You know, a lot of my problems that I have with my camellias, I know how to solve them, but when I'm looking for a special chemical or something, you know, I would contact the folks down at Pollen Landscaping, and they would do all of the research for me. And that way they can have it ready for me and I can just go and pick it up. I used to do the research, I'll be honest myself, but why do that when I have other folks that are willing to help me? So that's a good place. And they are located in West Ashley, North Charleston, Mount Pleasant. So they're all over the place and they can really help you out a great deal. So I want to go into propagation. I know everybody's waiting on this. Everybody want to know how to grow Camellia japonicas. And you know, in the 1940s and 50s and even up into the 60s, that was a huge thing going on in the low country about growing Camellia japonicas. And everybody who were gardeners, everybody who wanted to be a gardener was growing Camellia japonicas, and they were sharing the cuttings with one another and different varieties. And that's how you got so many different varieties spread out throughout the low country. So I hope that they will come back soon, because I really want to see that happen again. I think that we don't really utilize the Camellia japonicas like the old folks used to do in the old days. So I hope we can start doing that again. So I'm going to talk about some different technique in propagation. So the first one is going to be just seed propagation, as Kim is going to come up and show you something that we did here. This is just basic seed propagation without any real serious amendment from us in the horticulture department. This is the way it's done out in nature. This is how Camellia japonica continue to strive, and it continue to create new varieties, because a lot of these seedlings here, out of 100% of the seedling that we have, it probably only 1% will be of a flower that would be a name variety, one that we can name. So if you want to name a Camellia japonica after you, and you have a seed-bearing parent plant, then whatever that seed, whenever it germinates, there's not one like that. There's only one of that kind. There's never a duplicate. It's like our fingerprint. So it comes from the same parent, but the flowers will be different. 99% of the time, it's normally a red single bloom. But every so often, you're going to get one that is going to be special. It might be a double, it might be a semi-double, it might even be variegated, it may be white or pink, and that's a special camellia. And you can name that camellia after you. So what we did here, we just collected the seed in September of 2020, and we just laid it on some peat and some perlite and some vermiculite, and just really covered it with a little bit of the same product and kept it moist, but not too moist. And then it started to germinate. So these will be new seedling Middleton Place camellias that we will one day sell in the garden market and nursery here at Middleton Place. And we have been doing this for several years now. And what I like about this is Mother Nature at her best. You just let her do her thing. And that is what's happening here. No chemical, no spraying, no fungicide, nothing. We just put it in the greenhouse to keep the squirrels from getting the seeds. Because normally that's what happened out in nature. All of them never get to germinate. But this is really special. So this is one way of doing it. And anyone can do it. So you can do it. This is pretty much foolproof. Anyone can do that. So continue looking at some other methods of propagation. So when we look at grafting, and grafting is one that have always been done, especially in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. This was one that everyone was doing. Most of the folks that I know always do the side graft. Side grafting is pretty much the easiest and safest way to graft your camellias. But then here again, there are other ways of doing that where you can create the greenhouse effect by using a plastic jug and just placing that plastic jug over the camellia stock with the new stock or the new sign that you are trying to grow. Now, keep in mind, for the most part, Camellia japonicas are always grafted on Camellia sasanqua, okay? Because the sasanqua have a vigorous root system and it really grows fast. So, for instance, if you have a Camellia japonica that is a slow grower, you want it to grow faster, graft it on a Camellia sasanqua and it will grow faster. So these are just a few techniques. This particular technique here is too difficult. You do not want to try this. This is like really difficult. You have to really know what you are doing. But now I also know that there are some special tools on the market now that will make this a whole lot easier that you can purchase in order to do that. Okay? All right, so Kim, don't go away. Let's look at some others here. So here's another method of grafting and or creating different varieties of camellias on one plant. So you have grafting here. There's two cyan or graft here, but there are different variety of flowers, different japonicas. So this may be a white, this could be a pink, this could be a Dr. Tinsley, this could be a Margaret Davis, and they just graft together and put inside the rooting compound, and then have a medium that is well drained. It must be well drained and have some organic matter to it. And you graft that together, this will root out in here. And once that root out, when this grows into a plant, you will have two different varieties on one shrub. So you can do that very easily. The side graft, you can see how that's grafted in there, and it works very well. Pay attention to how the edges are tapered, because you have to do that. That's very important to do that as well. Okay, so many different ways of doing this. It's amazing how many different ways you can propagate your plant material. Yeah. So also, I already showed you the seeds. We've already talked about that. But did you know you can actually take a graft and put it into a seed pod as well? Keep in mind the seed is full of energy, and the root system will create pretty easily. So you can graft into the seed as well. Now I'm gonna show you a demonstration of this type of grafting here, and you can see what we would have to do. We always have to sacrifice one plant in order to create another plant when you're doing this type of grafting. That's very important. And also, we'll show you this one as well. This is ear layering, and this is one of my favorite. This is what I really love doing. This is how we propagated the oldest camellia planted here at Middleton Place that was given by Andre Michaud, the French botanist. And this ear layering technique is really awesome, and it created a much larger plant and a much older plant. Say, for instance, this branch that was being ear layered, if that branch was already 10 years old, when you remove it from the plant, you have a 10-year-old plant. So this is why I really love ear layering. It's one of the safe practices on propagation for the Camellia japonica. Okay, all right. I hope you all are having fun so far. So also, Kim, I may have to have you come one more time and look at this, because I want to make sure that everyone understands the importance of foliage, the leaf foliage. This is just a cross-section cut of the foliage, just to show you that there's a lot going on within that little small leaf that you cannot see. I don't know how many times this has been magnified, but I'm sure hundreds and thousands of times, right? So keep in mind, these over here dissolved in your phloem is very important. They are the highways from the root system through the stalk to the leaves, and that's how energy moves up and down in the plant. So you want to make sure that your leaves receive filter sunlight, because if it doesn't, a lot of time these will shrink and get smaller. So these arteries or highways have to remain open properly so that your plant can grow. And this has a lot to do with the root system, a lot to do with the foliage, a lot to do with the sunlight. That's very important because there's just so much going on in there to keep that plant growing vigorous. And also, the plant leaves have a unique technique that whenever it receives too much water, it can release it. It knows when it has too much pressure in the leaf, and it will release that water. I'm sure some of you have walked under the tree before, and it wasn't raining, but water was dropping from the tree. Well, that's what happened. That tree root system had absorbed too much water, and it's just releasing it. It's sort of like a pressure release valve to make sure that the leaves do not rupture. Those cells will rupture. So keep that in mind. Watering is very important. Okay. All right. Thank you, Kim. Awesome deal there. So also want to talk about pest control. Now, with the Camellia japonica, mainly would be your T-scale. Once you get beyond that, there's really not a lot of pests. T-scale is one thing that will always affect your Camellia japonica. Now, you can always tell if you have T-scale, if the leaves are not completely green and they begin to look a little bit yellow on the top, they begin to look like something is coming through the leaves, something is going on there. What happened is that the scale will never be on the top of the foliage, it's always under the foliage. So you need to inspect your plant because most of the time, if you can see damage on the top, that damage has been there for a long time. It's just gotten so bad that now it's coming up through the leaves. So you want to make sure that you monitor that, okay? So just want to tell you about some of my tools that I use. I think I saw one of the email was talking about, you know, what kind of pruners and all of that good stuff. So, you know, if you're going out to prune your plant, make sure that you have a lopper, a big lopper like this, if you know you're going to be cutting some large branches out of your plant. It's very important to have the proper tool if you're going out to do that type of work. Always have my gloves ready. Should have your glove ready to do that as well. And I also want you to understand that most of your pruning is going to be with a small device like this. The majority of them will be using a pruner like this because this is pretty much all you need to go out and to do your pruning, okay? Very important. Now, so Kim, can you come up again and give a close-up here? So when we were talking about the air layering, this is what I want you to understand. This is sphagnum moss, and this is what we use. What I do, I will soak this overnight in water, and then I will try to wring out as much water as possible. And then I would take that and put it in this new device. So now they sell this online. You do not have to make this like how I used to do it in the old days. And you fill this with sphagnum moss and you would squeeze it together. And when you do that, what you would do is that the limb that you decide that you're going to air layer, you would take that and place it around that limb like that. And it's full of sphagnum moss. And that sphagnum moss will remain damp. Always write the date on there. And this has a way of securing itself. And you need not go back and check this for at least 6 months. And I know that's going to be difficult and hard to do, but you really need to just leave it alone for about 6 months. And the time to do this is once the plant has started putting out new growth, and that's when you want to go ahead and do this. And this is pretty much foolproof. You definitely will have a new plant. So that's one thing, how to do that as well. So also, I'm going to give you a demonstration here on propagating a Camellia japonica onto a Camellia sasanqua. Now, this is the one that Kim always seemed to say, what? I can't believe you're going to do that. But this is going to be the rootstock for the Camellia japonica graft. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut that off of there. And I can root some of these if I like. But my main focus is to take this Camellia sasanqua and graft a Camellia japonica onto it. So What I'm going to do is after the plant have already got through blooming, the new leaves, the new growth have already came out. They have hardened off now to the point that they're pretty stiff. So now I can take that and cut that off there. So, and I'm going to remove some of these leaves. They're not necessary. I do not need them all. And some of them, I'm actually going to just take half of the foliage away. It's not necessary to keep all of that there because remember, there's no more root system. So there's not a root system. So we don't need to have all of that growth. So I'm going to taper this. And this is very touchy here. So make sure that you, and I know I should have my glove on. Everyone is saying that I can hear you. So just taper that on an angle like that. Okay, so that's done. That's ready to go. And now I have to prepare the stock. So in doing this, I want to just tap down on that. Okay, so I have that. I think, well, maybe just a little bit more. Now, so I'm going to pull this up and put it back here. I'm going to open this up. You can see how I spread that. Open it up. And then I'm going to take my Camellia Japonica, and I'm going to put it in there. And what's important is I have to line up the cambium growth with the stalk. And oh, that's pretty good. That is really good. Okay. And you can use some rubber band to keep that nice and tight and keep it very moist, not wet, but moist. And now that that's done, all I have to do is wait for the new growth, the cambium growth, to seal all of this around here. And now I have a Camellia Japonica grafted onto a Camellia Sasanka. And this is the way it's done. Now, if this Japonica ever should die, the Camellia Sasanka will start growing again. So all is not lost. That's very important. So there you go. You can do it. You can do it. Trust me, you can do it. I know you can do it. Okay, so also want to look at doing a little bit of pruning. Yeah. So Camellia Japonicas, they really, it's not necessary to prune them, but if you want to prune them, you can. Given the area that they're planted in, maybe you want to do it. It all depends. So I want this plant to have a better form, a better shape to it, and that's what I am looking at. This one branch seems to be just going out, just going out. So what I am going to do is I'm simply going to take this off here, take that off here, and now what's going to happen, I'm going to get a new growth, and that's going to come up, and I'm going to have some balance, and that is what I want. Now, another thing to keep in mind, some of our camellias will get too thick, and what happened is that if there's not enough air movement going through the plant, that is when you will have diseases setting in. Pests find a host, a place to live. So you want to thin that plant out. Sometimes it may just be removing some of the leaves. Other time it may be that you have to prune a limb off. That all depends on how you want that plant to look. What is the ideal shape of that plant? What are you looking to have? And another thing about pruning is that you can allow the limbs to remain close to the ground, or you can limb the plant up. That's all up to you. Camellias are very forgiving. And if something was to happen to this plant, if this plant was to simply got too large, I can just cut all of that off of it. Just cut it all the way back like that, and it will grow back. As long as I do that right after the blooming season, that's the best time to do that. Okay? That is the best time to do that. So, camellias are easy to grow, but we do sometimes need to put some fertilizer out. So this is one that I use. This is Polyton. This is a really good fertilizer for camellias and azaleas. This is one of my favorite, and it's organic. So I love using this. But here again, please have your soil tested. That's something that you want to do. But this is one that I use. It works very well. So if you have some other problems, there's some insect problems that's going on there. There's all kind of stuff that you can use. So this is neem. This will take care of your T-scale or aphids or any other kind of pest that you have. This is very reliable and very safe. This is a really good product, and I really advise you to use that product. It's very, very, very good. And this is one that have been around for extremely long time, the horticultural oil. The oil is one of the safest product that you can use for T-scale because it really works. But the thing is, you have to remember it's temperature control. So you don't want to put it out if it's going to freeze. You don't want to put it out if it's going to be very hot, because what it does is it smothers the plant. This is a very, 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 very good product to use. So a fungicide, liquid copper. This is, as you know, been around forever. This is a safe product, organically set up to be used for fungus, and this is one that we use pretty much for every fungus situation on our plants. And this is just another, this is copper soap. So this is something that you might want to try as well. This really works. This is a wonderful product to use. So I wanted to show you some ways just to take care of your pest problem. And keep in mind with the Camellia japonica, it's a shade-loving plant. You want to put it in a location where it's going to have filter light. You do not want it in a dark location. You do not want it in a location where it's getting too much sun. The Camellia japonica is your shade-loving plant, and your Camellia japonica will work in a little bit of light, but not too much light. But keep in mind, if you have an area that is really sunny, you want to use the Camellia sessile. That is the plant that you want to use because it can handle a lot of sun, and it can create a hedge. If you want to create a hedge, I would recommend that you use the Camellia sessile because that's the plant that will really perform well. You can trim it, you can cut it back real hard, and it will continue to grow. It will continue to produce for you. But if you want it to flower, if you want to enjoy the flower, you have to make sure that you do not trim it late summer because it begins to form those buds and it will bloom in November. So that's very important. So you want to keep that in mind. Okay, so did I answer all of the questions that came up or do we have a few more?
I think we have a few more. So thank you. Now, let me just say ahead of time here that I just received a bunch of emails. If you all registered for this with friends, we were supposed to have more than 100 attendee seats in this webinar, and I'm being informed that Zoom capped us at 100. So I just want to reiterate that this is being recorded and that it will be available for everybody, and that you can certainly email us, email Sidney and Kim anytime with your questions. So I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, so Sid, we do have some questions. What, if anything, should I do for my camellias that are coated in ice from the storm last night?
Nothing, nothing. Do not touch it. Allow Mother Nature to take her course. Just don't do anything. A lot of time, if you try to do something, you're going to alter the course of what the plant have already prepared itself for. If that plant have done well in the past, then it will continue to do well now. So just leave it alone. Do not try to do anything with the ice. Do not try to remove the ice. Just leave it alone. Because what happened is that the leaves are frozen. And if the plant throw out too quickly, the cells in the leaves will rupture and will create some problems. So you do not want to do that. Just leave it on. If it worked in the past, then it will work now.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question here. Some of my camellias leaves have holes in them. Some have tiny white and brown specks on them. How should I treat them? Oh, apparently the sound is suddenly off. That's interesting.
Oh, we lost sound.
I don't know. Can't hear Sidney. Uh-oh.
It's still with us.
How about now, folks?
Still can't hear me?
Okay, interesting.
No sound.
No sound.
No, they're good now. Sorry. I'm getting. Some people said it went off and some people said it didn't. So that's really exciting and interesting. Okay, everybody's saying it's good now. So cool. So I'm sorry, we were talking about some camellia leaves have holes, some have tiny white and brown specks on them. How should I treat them?
Okay, so it's very difficult to know exactly what's going on without looking at the leaves themselves. So if you can email those to us, I can take a look at them because it could be a multitude of things that are going on there.
It could be you have mites. It could be that you have T-scale. It could be the holes in the leaf. It could be that there's something nibbling on them, or it could be from tree that have some type of, like pine trees are really good for this. You grow your camellias on the pine tree, when those needles drop, they drop head first and they go straight through the leaves. So there are a multitude of things that could be going on there. So if you can send us something, I'll be happy to look at it and tell you what I think is happening there.
Great, thank you. We have a lot of questions being asked about yellow spots, and I know that you did address that a little bit. If you could just reiterate one more time.
Well, here's the thing about leaf spots on your plant. They are here, and there's a multitude of things that could be going on. I've seen leaves turn yellow when they had too much water. I've seen leaves turn yellow when they did not have enough water. But here's the thing about Camellia japonicas that people don't tend to think about. They are evergreen plants, but every 2 to 3 years, they will probably lose about a quarter of their leaves. What happened is that those leaves will turn yellow before they drop off. So if that's one of the situations where the leaf started to decline and the whole leaf began to turn yellow, then that's just Mother Nature doing her thing. That's all it is. So just keep that in mind. They're evergreen, but they do lose their leaves. They will not keep their leaves forever. Those leaves are constantly being replaced, but at a slower rate than other plants.
Great, thank you. Some from the, oh gosh, y'all, we have over 30 questions, so we'll try to get to all of them, but if your question doesn't get answered, please email them. You can either email them to me, cbloom@middletonplace.org. That's the email contact that you have from this webinar, and I will forward them immediately onto Sidney because I know nothing about camellias. Or you can email Sidney directly. Is that okay, Sid?
That is okay.
Okay, so I'll put his email in the chat window for all of you, so you can email Sidney directly if we don't get a chance to answer your question today. So there's a large camellia in my garden in Old Mount Pleasant. It has basically remained untouched since my great-grandfather tended to it. I'd love to know all the tips when it comes to pruning. So hopefully you were able, dear visitor, to hear some of Sidney's information about pruning. Hesitated to mess with it because of age. Would love to know best shape, tools, time of year, etc. So is there just anything additional that you'd like to mention about pruning?
Yeah,
old growth?
The most important thing is to make sure you prune the proper time of the year. That's the most important thing to do. Once the plant gets through blooming, that's the time that you go and you think about pruning. But it's not necessary to prune Camellia japonica unless there's some type of form or shape or retaining that you are trying to do and need to be done. In other words, you do not want it to grow into the gutter of your house. So you want to go ahead and prune it back. That's natural. But keep in mind, there are not plants that really needs to be pruned unless you're trying to create something. Or you're going to be transplanting that plant in a year. So the year before that, you want to go ahead and start cutting it back and preparing that plant to be properly transplanted from one location to another location. But if that plant is healthy, do not touch it. If it's healthy, just leave it alone.
Great, thank you. So there's a question here, and I expect I know what your answer is going to be, which is email me pictures, but I'll ask you anyway. In May of 2017, we had 8 Camellia sasanqua Marie Kirk installed in our front yard. One has since died, and while some of the remaining plants are doing better than others, none of them is particularly healthy. We've had a number of landscapers implement various recommendations, including changing the watering, testing the soil, and unburying the roots, and none of these has seemed to help. Do you have any ideas how we might nurse these plants back to health? Can you recommend someone who knows what they're doing with camellias that we might hire to assist in this process?
Well, Camellia sasanqua, if I'm not mistaken, that's what it was.
Sasanqua.
Right. Here's the thing about that. Camellia sasanqua, they really want to be in the full sun for the most part. So number one is to plant in the full sun. I I do not know that, but that's very important. That plant needs to receive more sun than shade. That's very important. And also it needs to be in a soil condition where it drains very well. So if it's, say perhaps if it's near the house where the water run off the roof, that is not healthy. That plant is not going to survive. So you may have to transplant it. You may have to remove it from that location. And thirdly, you need to know the condition of the soil. If that plant has been there for a while, it seems like it's not wanting to grow, maybe it's in the wrong location. Maybe that's just not the right location for it. And lastly, and I'm sure this is not the situation, but make sure that it is a Camellia sasanqua and not a Camellia japonica. You need to make sure that, because some of the Camellia japonica, they have small leaves as well, and they may look like they are a sasanqua, but there's a Camellia japonica. So I'm sure that your landscaper would know that, but I just want to point that out because I've seen that mistake made before.
That's actually a great segue into another question, Sid. What can you tell us about Camellia hybrids? Several of them are grown at Magnolia. It looks like a cross between Japonica and Sasanqua. They have smallish leaves, flowers that look like Sasanquas, but fall as one blossom and are blooming now.
And you just said everything that it is. The hybrids are all cross. That's what they are. And that's how you come up with a new hybrid. So that's a cross between some of the Japonicas, they just cross them, and some between a Sasanqua and a Japonica. But that's just a new hybrid. That's all it is. Most of the time, that's done to get a plant that would bloom earlier, get a plant that would have a larger flower, or to get a plant that would be more cold resistant. So that's why those new hybrids, and there are thousands of hybrids out there now. I mean, literally thousands of them. So yeah, hybrids they're nice plants to have.
That's so interesting. Thank you. So we have somebody who has what sounds like another sick camellia asking for some advice. So one of my camellias planted to grow espalier has lost almost all of its internal leaves. There are still leaves at the ends of the branches. It appears to have a fungus. Dropped leaves had white areas, others black, which I removed and then eventually treated the plant and its neighbor with copper spray. Now I'm wondering how aggressively to prune it. The stems of the main plant where it is bare are woody and about the thickness of my index finger. I'm reluctant to remove the stems with the growing leaves, but sometimes wonder if I should cut the branches way back to the area where it's bare.
Well, so if you want to maintain that foam in that shape, you're going to have to always do some pruning if you want to maintain that. But there's something else going on with that plant. So you have a disease problem, and I don't know if it's mites, I don't know if it's T-scale. Here again, I have to really see that plant. It's hard to know exactly what's going on there. But also there could be a problem in the soil as well if this plant is not in a container. If it's in the ground, then you need to investigate what's happening in the soil, because they are soil-borne diseases like Phytophthora and Bithia, and those things are always in the soil. They're just always in the soil. Given the right condition, they will become active and the plant will begin to take it into the root system. So there could be a multitude of things going on there.
That's interesting. You're great at these segues, Sid, because now I have a question about containers. Can these grow in a raised bed or container, or do they need to be directly planted into the ground? How do we fix our soil to make it more acidic for these and less later on in the season?
Well, they can be grown in a container. The further north you go, people grow them in containers, because what they do is in the wintertime, they bring them in. So you can grow Camellia japonicas in containers. I would advise you to, when you go to the nursery, to really pay attention to the label, because sometimes the label will tell you that this plant will only grow a maximum height of 6 feet or 7 or 8. So that's very important. You do not want something that have the characteristic of growing 12 to 16 feet, because it's going to be in a container. But here again, keep in mind, maybe every 2 years, you're going to have to bump that container up a size because of the root system that is going to be taking place in that container. But another way to do that is that you can root prune, you can control that root system, but then you may be going to have to do some foliage pruning as well. So keep in mind, well-drained soil. I cannot say that enough. Well-drained soil with some organic matter. And when you go, you don't have to mix this stuff. When you go to the nursery, just say you want a potting soil. That's all to it. It's already fixed, it's already ready, it's ready to go. But in that container, make sure you put a screen at the bottom because you have to have a drainage hole. Put a screen at the bottom. We call it pest stopper. And that will keep any pests from coming up in the pot. Because if there's nothing over that hole, you can have all kind of pests coming into the pot.
Got it. Hey, I have a soil question for you, Sid. We'd like to know which camellias work best when directly on the ocean. Are some varieties more salt tolerant than others?
Oh, listen, well, the Camellia japonica, the japonica is that species. So that's the species, okay? The Camellia sasanqua, that's the sasanqua is that species. You want to protect them from the breeze blowing in off the ocean. That's the most important thing. So depending on how your house is facing the ocean, you do not want them facing the ocean. That's very important because that salt air will actually burn the foliage. So you do not want that. So you want to make sure you protect them from that incoming breeze off the ocean. If you can do that, you can grow camellias. You can grow them. And again, remember, you need some organic matter in the soil, well-drained soil, pH under 7, and you should be able to grow your Camellia japonica. Make sure you do not plant them too deeply. That's very important. And I did not mention this, but mulching. I'm surprised no one asked about that. But mulching is very important. But here's the key. If you're going to mulch your Camellia japonica, and let's take this big one here. So move this for a second. When you are mulching your Camellia japonica, and this goes for any shrub or tree, that mulch should not come up any higher on the stalk than about 1 to 2 inches. That's it. Now, landscapers will put it 5 to 6 inches up. That's a no-no. When you do that, you create a situation where you will have a pest infestation. So you do not want to do that. 1 to 2 inches, and that's all you need. You do not need more than that. I always say, do not build a volcano around the plant. That's unhealthy. You do not want to do that at all. So just, 1 to 2 inches, and that will hold the moisture in during the dry season for you. So that's the rule of thumb on mulching your camellias.
Oh my gosh, you all have such great questions. Okay, let's see. I had one. Firstly, they're asking about your products, Sid. So would you be able to send me a list of all your favorite products and brands so that we can send it out to participants?
Absolutely.
Great. So if you're all asking about brands, products, and brands that Sidney likes to use, we will send that to you after this is over. Here we go. We have 3 50-year-old plants which are tree-sized. They develop hundreds of buds, but they never bloom. Is there a reason why this happens?
Oh my God, I can't believe it. They don't bloom. So they form the buds, but they do not bloom. That is definitely something going on structure-wise in the root system there. There's something called bullhead, and bullhead normally happen late in the season where the buds did not open before the season end, and the bud drop off completely. The buds just drop off. So I was saying that it's forming the bud. The foliage is nice and green, I would suspect, and the buds are not opening. Check your soil, do your soil pH check, see what's going on there, and do an upgrade on your soil test, which will include other minor elements in the soil, because the chemistry buildup of the soil, I think that's where the problem is. It sounds like everything above the soil is doing what it should be doing, but maybe there's not enough energy there to push those buds open. There's enough energy to form the bud, but not to push them open. And also, I don't know when the last time you did any fertilization. So that's something that you need to look at as well. So you're almost there, but you're not quite there. So there's something going on.
So I have 2 questions. One about, should pine pollen be cleaned off of the leaves? And do you have any ideas about deer deterrence?
I don't know what you can do about deers. I mean, if they start eating on a Camellia japonica, that means that they're really hungry. I mean, really hungry, because that would be the last plant that they will go after. Camellia japonica. But I have seen it happen, but that's after we had a really bad winter. A lot of what they would be in the wild had not developed. So that's the only reason they would not do that. So, and what was the other part of that question?
Pine pollen. Should pine pollen be wiped off of leaves?
Yes, you do not want anything blocking the sun or the light on your foliage, nothing. So, you know, sphagnum moss, moss sometimes will cover camellias if you have a large tree. You want to remove that. That's very important. The leaves on the Camellia japonica need to be exposed to light at all time. Filtered light is always preferable. But keep in mind, if there's something like that on it, remove it.
And we know you have a favorite soil testing company. Can you share with us where and how to get soil tested, who you would recommend?
Well, I do, and I mentioned it before. And the company that I think, well, you know, you can use your extension agency. Clemson Extension Agency, there's one in probably every county or every other county, and they will do that for you. But if you want a soil test that would go a little bit deeper, I can tell you that if you contact these folks, they will make sure that you have a soil test that will have every item on it that you are looking for. They are really good about doing that. So if you're looking for more detail, you can do that. But Clemson Extension Agency, they also do soil testing, and they can help you out as well.
That website is possumsupply.com. Is that what that card says?
I can't even see it.
I'm going to put it right here in the chat.
You're right, that's it.
Possumsupply.com. There you go, folks. All right. I've got time for a couple more. Well, that's an interesting question. So why would you graft a Japonica onto a Sasanqua rootstock?
Okay, well, the thing about the Japonica, the root system on the Japonica grows a little bit slower than the Camellia Sasanqua. The Camellia Sasanqua have a much faster growing root system. They push energy up the stalk much faster than the Japonica. So by doing that, the graft would take place a lot faster and it would grow faster. And that's the reason for it. In the 40s and 50s and 60s, 98% of your grafting was done on Camellia Sasanqua. So that was the ticket. Everyone knew that that was the way to do it. There are other stocks that you can use, but the Camellia Sasanqua is so readily available. So why not use it?
For sure. And one that sort of builds on that question, but I think you probably just sort of answered that as well because it's fast growing. Someone asked, can you not try and root the piece of Camellia japonica that you cut?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you take cuttings all of the time and root that. And remember, on the cutting, when you take it, it doesn't need to be more than 3 inches long, okay? So when you take a cutting, I'll let Kim come up and take a close-up at this. So when you take a cutting from your Camellia japonica, 3 inches long, that's enough. You don't need to have it longer than that. So you see this bud right here, that's a vegetation bud. So I can just pop that off there, and I can just take this and cut that right there. And I might even take a little bit of that Cambium growth off, and I would just stick that in my soil. And putting that in the soil, keeping it moist, and just wait until it roots. And it will root out for you if the conditions are right. Sometimes you can remove some of the leaves. You don't need to have all of this here because remember, there's no root system, so there's nothing really coming up that's xylem and phloem. So you want to keep that in mind as well and keep it moist, and all go well, it should root for you, and you have a plant that you can put in your garden.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, do we have one more or that's it?
Yes, I have 21 more, but I will be happy to pick just one more. Should the blooms that drop to the ground be removed from around the plant?
That's a very good rule of thumb. You should do that, but you know, I would say if you have 50 or less, that's a good practice, because once you get beyond 50 camellia plants, that's a lot to be moved. So yes, if you can do that, remove them, disregard them, never put them in your compost pile, because the spores from petal blight that attack the flower only, they are in there. So do not do that. You want to disregard them, put them in the trash and let they be taken away. And that's a wonderful question, because we did not cover that, but just very briefly, if Kim can come up, very briefly. You know, it's hard to remember everything because there's so much to talk about when you talk about Camellia japonica. So when you look at this flower, this is a fleshy pink flower. If this flower had petal blight, and the thing about this blight, it is so unique, it only attacks the petal. It doesn't attack any other part of the plant whatsoever. So if this particular plant had petal blight, on the light colored petal, it will be a brown spot. It will look brown if it was petal blight. Now, if this was a dark red, then it will look more white, but it's the same blight, and it only attacked the flower. And what happened is that once this flower dropped to the ground, and the unique thing about Camellia japonica, the flower is fused at the base. So when the flower dropped, the whole flower dropped, not just petals, but the whole flower will drop to the ground. That's one unique thing about the Camellia japonica. And those spores would go into the mulch and they would sit there all year until the plant started blooming again. And then under the right condition, the wind, the temperature, the humidity, those spores will become active and they will attack the flower. The good thing for us in the low country is that our camellias are blooming during the colder, cooler time of the year, and the blight need a little bit warmer temperature. So that's a good thing for us. So right now at Middleton Place, our camellias are blooming. I mean, the gardens are gorgeous right now with Camellia japonica blooming throughout the garden. And what our camellia walks have already been started. And I hope most of you have already signed up. If you have not, you need to get online right now and do that. But this is an awesome time to come to the gardens at Middleton Place to see the Camellia japonicas in bloom. The gardens are always lovely, but this is a special time of the year what we are celebrating the camellias at Middleton Place.
That's great. Thank you so much. So folks, if you had a question that we didn't get to you today, thank you so much for your participation. We really appreciate it. Again, you can either forward that question to me and I'll pass it along to Sidney, or you can email him directly. I'll put his email in the chat window again. Thank you so much for being here. This is being recorded and it will be posted on Middleton Place Foundation's YouTube channel. No need to go back and keep checking for that. You have all registered, so we will be emailing you with a follow-up email to let you know when and where you can view this again on YouTube. So don't worry, you don't have to frantically check our YouTube. And thank you all so much for participating today. We look forward to seeing you here at Middleton Place, to joining a camellia walk, and really to just being out here anytime to enjoy Sidney's beautiful work. Thank you. At middletonplace.org. So I'm going to put that right there in the chat window one more time for those of you who are leaving. Thanks again. We will see you next time.